Within Dungeons & Dragons, the alignment of chaos represents freedom, adaptability, and flexibility. However, it also includes recklessness, arbitrary action, and irresponsibility. Which side a creature leans very much depends on where they fall on the good and evil chart. While some can fall into a trap of playing too far into an alignment, if played well, alignment can provide a useful cornerstone to flesh out characters and NPCs. A chaotic good character might be a freedom fighter looking to save the people against a tyrannical ruler. A chaotic evil character might be a freedom fighter looking to burn down everything related to that tyrannical ruler, including the unwillingly ruled people. A chaotic neutral character might be a freedom fighter to free themselves, and who cares about the rest? In the Great Wheel cosmology model, each of the 9 possible alignment combinations are represented by an outer plane whose inhabitants embody that particular alignment combination. Much like how devils and demons embody evil law and chaos alignments respectively of the hells and the abyss, and the angels represent lawful good alignment of the heavens, the Slaad are the inhabitants of the ever-changing chaos of limbo, where the chaotic neutral alignment rules. These frog-like natives are chaos-given flesh, obsessed with proving and improving their personal power as manifestation of their desire for unrestrained freedom. Ultimate expression of freedom for themselves, the Slaad believe in might makes right, where individual strength is one of, if not the greatest virtue. It is the dreaded Death Slaad that most often dominates all of its lessers, followed by the Gray Slaad, then the Green, then the Blue, and then, towards the end, the Red. Yet there is always a smaller fish, or Slaad, to push around. The not even worthy of a color punching bag. The impulsive cringer, the crying frog. Let's talk about the Mud Slaad. So, what are we going to be covering? First, in this episode, we're going to talk about what a Mud Slaad is. Next, we'll dive into its origins or try to figure out the possible origins for the Mud Slaad. After that, we'll explore how I rebuilt the Mud Slaad for the 2024 edition of D&D and how they can fare in combat. We'll close out then with some ideas on how to add the Mud Slaad not only as a monster of the week, but as part of an ongoing campaign. Now, with diving into the Mud Slaad, this actually allows me to talk about the Slaad themselves. The Slaad are one of those really old types of monsters, dating back all the way from the very first edition of D&D, coming from the book Fiend Folio, Tomb of Creatures, Malevolent and Benign, back in 1981, and have appeared in every edition since. Although it did take them some time to evolve from goofy-looking frogmen into beings of pure chaos. Like the Beholder, the Slaad don't have an equivalent mythological creature that they were drawn from, and are one of the handful of D&D monsters that are considered product identity. So don't, While the Slaad have been around since the very beginning of D&D, the Mud Slaad first appeared in Fiend Folio for 3rd edition, and have not appeared since. Unlike plenty of other one-shot monsters, I don't even know if this is a shame or not. Maybe that's because of how cringy they are. But before we do a dive into the Mud Slaad, I have a few things I need to explain about the Slaad race as a whole first before you can really understand these bizarre monsters, and how the Mud Slaad is bizarre even by their own standards. All of the Slaad are from the plane of extreme chaos, known as the ever-changing chaos of Limbo. As mentioned, Limbo is an outer plane in the Great Wheel cosmology model that embodies chaotic neutral. Chaotic neutral incarnate, the plane is an ever-twisting and shifting mess of landscapes that seemingly change at a whim. Whose whim? Yes. That mountain is now a valley full of swimming plants. A volcano is spewing a river made of thumbtacks. A tree is made of clouds looking to fight you for the air that you've imprisoned in your lungs. It's a pretty crazy place. Actually, if you're strong enough, such as a powerful spellcaster or a demigod, you could stamp down enough of the craziness to carve out a piece of limbo as your own. Maybe because your enemies will have a hard time getting to you in limbo? Maybe because you like an ever-changing view outside your window? It's frankly impressive that something manages not only to survive, but thrive there, with every moment that is before you could be something else entirely. And the Slaad definitely thrive in limbo. Evolved from a lesser form, uplifted by some foolish god, or some third option that only makes sense in limbo, these toad-like beings embody the endless potential of limbo. While Slaad aren't inherently evil as a whole, they fall into chaotic neutral. Though, to be fair, some of the more powerful Slaad can be a bit sketchy when it comes to alignment. The Slaad's impulses are wild and often destructive. Like their reproduction method, but we'll get into that later. Physically, Slaad are large bipedal frogmen with long, sharp claws, wide mouths filled with pointed teeth, and huge heads. That general description is about the best you can get describing the species. As creatures of chaos, no two Slaad are alike even amongst the same subtype. Mutations run rampant, leading to Slaad with horns, scales, feathers, hair, and even tentacles as some of the mild options of what could appear. Some might not even look like frogmen, but could be angry beavers, for instance. The closest quote-unquote standard among the Slaad is the color of their subtype, but even that can be twisted via shades or even a Slaad of the very opposite color. And all of that is just the Slaad physically. Their mentality is a whole nother level. To understand the mindset of a Slaad, one must completely embrace chaos to some degree, or at least be a bit of a prick or have to deal with one. If you try traditional diplomacy like negotiation or threatening with the Slaad, you're probably just going to get attacked. Logic, or even offering something that is in the Slaad's best interest, will only lead the Slaad to refuse to see reason and get real angry with you. Or run away in fear. Or pretend this was just opposite day. Or they might just refuse to believe that the speaker was real at all. Ultimately, the Slaad do not engage in conversation like we do. They have no rhetoric. They have no discussions. They make no bargains. They accept no bribes. They hate flattery since it's trickery. They ignore appeals for mercy. That's not their nature. It's not because the Slaad refuse to be diplomatic. It's the fact that they don't understand the concept of diplomacy the way that most mortals do. What they do believe in, however, is personal freedom and getting theirs. Fun fact about the Slaad: they aren't greedy. The Slaad lack the basic concept of personal possession. The Slaad don't have items or land that they own. This strikes me as the result of living in endless chaos. Nothing is permanent, so why bother having it? As a result, a Slaad simply takes what they need when it is required. They need that rock, they pick it up. They need that meat to eat, go grab it. Someone else has that rock you want? Can you take it? The stronger a Slaad is, the more it could take. It's a fitting mentality for a chaotic neutral creature that only values their own freedom. I need that, and that's all that matters. Individual strength is the greatest virtue because the stronger you are, the more you can take. And as such, the Slaad as a whole value conflict since it's a chance to prove their strength, to prove who is stronger. This leads to a strange sort of hierarchy that exists among the Slaad. Might makes right. Might makes everything. The stronger Slaad oppress and dominate their weaker brethren as it's simply their right to do so. The weaker Slaad accept this behavior because they're weaker. What really made it click for me was thinking of it this way. It's a culture of bullies where everyone wants to be the bigger bully. It's this mindset that leads the Slaad to be nearly impossible to deal with for most mortals. Bully is a form of social interaction for the Slaad. Bullies don't negotiate with the weak, they take. If the Slaad is weaker, why isn't the big fighter just taking what they want from the Slaad instead of making their mouth noises? And it really, really sucks to be the weakest of the bullies. What I guess one might call Slaad society is basically groups of pillaging barbarian tribes roaming around limbo with no permanent home, led by the strongest Slaad in the group. Thankfully for the rest of us, the strength of the Slaad is color coordinated to help us figure out who is the strongest. Mostly. Now, from strongest to weakest, at the very top are the thankfully also very rare Black Slaad, embodiments of entropy, as strong as a dragon that can harness raw chaos to degrade reality itself. They sit at the very top of the Slaad pile. The White Slaad are also creatures of pure chaos, with the ability to manipulate / break down time. Thankfully, once again, very rare creatures. If any of the Slaad could be said to lead more day to day, that would be the Death Slaad. As the name implies, the Death Slaad are sadistic bullies that go too far, bringing death and pain to all others. With the traditional colors of death being black and white being taken up by the stronger Slaad, I guess the Death Slaad just thought of calling themselves Death instead of another color, which is cool. We don't talk about the Gormel. Well, we will. I promise, we will. However, a lawful Slaad hurts my brain at this moment, so we're just gonna keep going. Back to the colors. We have the Gray Slaad, the magically obsessed lieutenants to the Death Slaad, but ready to step in and become a Death Slaad if the boss becomes weak for even a moment. One of the common Slaads, the Green Slaad, has magical capabilities and uses those to push around all the remaining lesser common Slaads. It's from the Green Slaad that all the previous Slaad come from, sort of evolving from one form to the next. Marginally stronger and smarter than the remaining Slaad, the Blue Slaad still lords over them and absolutely despises the fact that their diseased claws make the hated Red Slaad. And in turn, the Red Slaad hate the Blue Slaad too, especially the fact that the eggs that they leave in mortals produce the hated Blue Slaad. And for most people, the Red are the lowest of the low of the Slaad, the weakest amongst the chaotic frogs. But then, that's where the Mud Slaad come in. A Mud Slaad is the lowest of the low of the low of the Slaads. Weaker in all ways compared to the otherwise bottom of the totem pole Red Slaad. Physically, they look like any other Slaad, save for their skin color, which ranges from various browns to sickly brownish greens. Or mud, one might say. What really sets the Mud Slaad apart is their mindset. What is a Mud Slaad? A coward. Part of the general Slaad mentality is craving conflict to prove one's own strength and to get stronger. However, the Mud Slaad don't want conflict. They don't want to be in danger. In their very hearts, they are cowards. A Mud Slaad values their own life versus anything else. Other Slaads want to prove their strength and be the biggest bully above everyone else. A Mud Slaad is just hoping they'll get shoved into a locker and left alone. And they develop an arsenal to be pathetic. Weaponize patheticness so that their attackers will just leave them alone. If seemingly outmatched, they will either cower or pretend to have died, with mechanical effects and implication of these actions. In the world of the Slaad, where do these sad sacks come from? Much like other Slaad, they come from their victims. Also known as Slaad fever, the chaos phage is a magical disease and a part of the complex reproductive cycle of the Slaad. The red Slaad implant eggs beneath their victim's skin, which, when they hatch, will devour the host from the inside before emerging and growing into a blue Slaad. The blue Slaad infect their victims with the chaos phage disease that slowly transforms that victim into a red Slaad. Basically, blue Slaad make red and red Slaad make blue. A green Slaad could appear if one or both the quote-unquote parents was an arcane caster. That's just the basic Slaads. Gray Slaads were once green Slaads that Pokemon style evolved via negative energy after a year of isolation. Death Slaads were once gray Slaads that reached that next level by being even more evil, along with some isolation. White Slaad were once Death Slaads with some more isolation and chaos thrown in. The same idea for the Black Slaads, who were once White Slaads that had even more isolation as they became even closer to chaos of the abyss. That is all very much in keeping with the Slaad's mentality of gaining more personal strength. Any creature hit by a Mud Slaad can become infected with a disease that, if not cured, transforms the victim over the course of a week into a Mud Slaad. That sounds a lot like the blue Slaad's chaos phage, to the point where you have to think that it's a mutation of some sort. It's chaos. A mutation makes a lot of sense. Look at the green Slaad. The green Slaad is clearly a mutation. The chaos phage mutating when it comes in contact and infects the arcane caster, creating a green Slaad instead of a red one like it should. When it comes to the Mud Slaad, a blue bites a victim and the phage mutates the victim, not producing a red but something worse, a dead-end mutation. You have to think whatever the infected target was that caused the Mud Slaad mutation, it had to be something potent, yet exceedingly pathetic. What sort of creature could have possibly been the initial host that would lead not to a red Slaad, but to a cowardly Mud Slaad? Slaad are known to prefer infesting stronger beings since they are likely to spawn stronger offspring. Infected arcane casters becoming green, for instance. That's why Slaad tried to infect fiends for that very reason, since demons and devils are typically pretty powerful. But not all of them. In the same fiend folio as the Mud Slaad, there is a Yugoloth known as a Skirloth. As a CR3 monster, Skirloths are near universally regarded as contemptible scum by other fiends, noted as unreliable, treacherous, and weak opponents compared to practically any other fiend. Which sounds pretty familiar to me, but it gets better. Skirloths have pale red-gray skin, which pales further to a milky white when they are scared, which they almost always are. So they're cowards. Cowards that have a very interesting and pathetic mechanical ability to cower, cringing in fear so pathetically that many foes could not bring themselves to harm them. A lot like a Mud Slaad. I think a blue Slaad infected a Skirloth but the chaos phage mutated and instead created a Mud Slaad. The first Mud Slaad's cowardly nature likely kept it alive long enough to infect others and produce more of the Mud Slaads. What a terrible fate. But what a really interesting mechanic. No matter how pathetic the Mud Slaad are compared to the rest of the Slaad society, and to be fair, other societies as well, they are still Slaad and still dangerous monsters. As a CR6 aberration, the Mud Slaad are decently strong, agile, and tough. As with the other common Slaad, the Mud Slaad has a dangerous claw attack that they can swing up to 3 times, potentially infecting a lot of victims. The disease claw of the Mud Slaad operates a lot like how the Blue Slaad's claw attack does, cursing a victim to lose their hit point maximum, and if the curse is not removed, the victim will eventually turn into a Mud Slaad. Unlike its contemporaries, the red and blue, the Mud Slaad has an additional offensive trick up its sleeves: Sonic Screech. This allows it to produce a thunderous cry that is so potent that it harms those nearby. Weaponized patheticness indeed. And defensively, there's even more sadness. Really, it's with its defenses where the Mud Slaad, I can't really say impresses, so I'm going to say shines. The AC and hit points are in rough alignment for their CR. Like the other Slaad, the Mud Slaad have resistance to acid, cold, fire, and lightning, with an added bonus of being immune to thunder. They also have magic resistance, much to the great annoyance of spellcasters, and they have some regeneration to help their hit points. Even with that regeneration, should a Mud Slaad get reduced to 10 or fewer hit points, it can feign death, falling over and pretending the blow was lethal. So dramatic and skillful is the Slaad at pretending it's dead, anyone that tries to check to see if it's actually alive or not has disadvantage on the roll. A Mud Slaad lowers its heart rate and stills its breathing so effectively, only a skilled doctor can see they're really alive. And then we get to the crying. I guess if we're being technical about it, the Mud Slaad aren't really crying, but acting fearfully, but I'd imagine there's going to be some big wet tears involved. As an action, the Mud Slaad can cringe. They cower in fear and look so pathetic and sad that anyone who targets the Mud Slaad has to make a wisdom saving throw or become charmed. Meaning the target is so either disgusted with themselves or the Mud Slaad they can't bring themselves to attack it. The target can try to break out of it at the end of each turns, trying to rationalize themselves that it's okay to hit that big mess of sad before them. What an ability. I love it. I love it. When in a fight, a Mud Slaad is going to be pretty upset because it does not want to be in a fight. When forced to fight, I see the Mud Slaad as trying to get in a few hits, specifically trying to infect a few victims, and then getting out of dodge. It does not want to be in a fight, but it won't mind a few more friends that'll hopefully be a bit weaker than it so it can bully them around. At the start of a fight, the Mud Slaad should use cringe and maintain concentration on it as long as possible to try to keep as many attacks from hitting it. Sonic Screech is a good area of effect with a recharge of 6, so it won't be available more than maybe once or twice in a fight, so I see it as a weapon of last resort if the Mud Slaad gets surrounded. The Disease Claw is what the Mud Slaad wants to do. Hit as many uncharmed or weak-looking targets as possible so they get infected. If the Mud Slaad can, I think it would run away if the opportunity came up, but most likely in a fight, it's going to end up using feigned death to survive. Surviving to see another day with hopefully a few new Mud Slaad friends on the way. Storytelling with the Mud Slaad runs counter to stories one would tell with the rest of the Slaad, but we can play with that. A Mud Slaad wants to make more Mud Slaads so it's no longer alone. With an added bonus, it can probably pick on a few of the weaker new Mud Slaad. Leaning this into a horror story, a Mud Slaad could have made it over to the material plane and stumble upon a lone wanderer who it infects, but then is seemingly killed. The wanderer heads into town with a weird story to tell, but then at some point succumbs to the mud phage, becoming a Mud Slaad and then disappearing into the night since, they don't want to fight. More people get infected over the following weeks, more disappearances, and you get a weird cross between an alien kidnapping and a zombie adventure, where the party is hired to find out what is going on. Where do people keep mysteriously disappearing off to? Maybe at night, the Mud Slaad attack the town long enough to infect a few people before disappearing once more. And then over the course of a week, these people disappear. The adventure party hunts down, finds the Mud Slaads, and seemingly kills them all off, only to unknowingly leave more and more alive because, they're feigning death. So the attacks a little bit later happen again. Can the party figure out what is going on before it's too late? So one of the changes to the Slaad lore in 5th edition is that their origin may have been tied to that of the Moderns. The Moderns are essentially the counterpart of the Slaad, beings of pure logic and law. Basically, the top guy of the Modern, Primus, tried to create order in the chaotic realm of Limbo by sending a huge lost stone into it, and figuring it would be like a seed that would spawn flowers of order. Instead, the stone absorbed the chaotic energies of Limbo and spawned the Slaad. This stone is now known as the Spawning Stone. And the Moderns really want to figure out what happened and see if they can fix it. One of the more intelligent Moderns reach out to the party seeking to capture various Slaad, including a Mud Slaad. To keep the story Mud Slaad centered, the Moderns think they can cure the Spawning Stone, but in order to do so, the party has to deliver a specific Mud Slaad to it, alive. Good luck with that. A Slaad born from the Spawning Stone has a magical control gem embedded in their head. Mud Slaads obviously don't have one of them since they weren't born of the Spawning Stone. I can see a campaign built around a person who has become infected with the Mud Slaad disease, but obviously doesn't want to turn into that sad sack of a creature. So instead, they want to get one of those gems, not to become a Mud Slaad, but to become one of the superior forms. The party could be hired to take one off another Slaad, like a Death Slaad or a Gray Slaad, or maybe even a Green Slaad, without knowing the reason why. That person then transforms, but is able to control it so they still have their memories. From there, they decide, hey, let's be a White Slaad, let's be a Black Slaad. Perhaps they can even evolve to an unknown form of Slaad. At that level of power, they then decide everyone else across the material plane should be a Slaad as well, beneath them. I learned about the Slaad a long time ago, due to them being the mortal enemies of my Goblin Paladin's god. My character hated frogs even before I knew about them, so it all worked out. The Slaad have this quality to me that makes me just want to punch them in the face. I think that's the bully hunter aspect of myself. Find a bully and stop the bully in the only way they understand. I think that's something a lot of PCs can get behind. They all have this sort of bully hunter mentality built into them, since they go out and find stuff that's picking on people and then put it into the dirt. It's a natural fit. The Mud Slaad, on the other hand, makes you feel like you're punching down, which is a really weird feeling since they are Slaad and are CR6 to boot, so they're not pushovers. They're just so sad and pathetic, you feel bad about doing it. But as my god Merrick once said, or would have said if he ever spoke or wasn't a figment of my imagination, hey, just punch the damn frogs in the face. And I think we all can get behind that. In the description below, I have a link to a monster stat block for the Mud Slaad, updated to the 2024 edition of Dungeons & Dragons, ready for you to unleash upon your players. Now, as we are a growing channel, if you found this interesting, please leave a like and a subscribe for all our future videos. It really does mean the world. Let me thank all of you for your time and wishing you all the best until we meet again for our next monster.